Alex, welcome. Thank you very much for doing this.
Sure, no problems.
Great. Well, basically, I wanted to get to know you a bit more and understand a bit about your background as well, how you got into the industry. So I want to first start off with, do you remember, I think the first time when we met? A quiz.
I should say yes, but I've got a terrible memory. I can remember facts and things, but people.
Yeah. I believe it was when I went to Auckland to give a presentation on something about this energy project that I was doing. And it was, I think, the first AGM meeting. And you're in the audience potentially, along with a couple of people who started the association. Do you remember that time in Auckland?
Yes. So that was at Auckland Grid, wasn't it? In
Yes.
the cafe bit. Yeah, no, I remember that. I thought what you were doing was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know you at the time, and I didn't know anyone really, but it was like the AGM, and then I also came across, I think, a document that you actually signed as actually starting the association. Is that true?
Yeah. I was one of the well, when you start up an incorporated society, you need, I think, 12 or 15 people, and I was one of the people. Yeah, so I've been involved prior to Blockchain NZ forming. So I think it was a different name, wasn't it? Blockchain Association.
Yeah, the Blockchain Association of New Zealand, which I think Stephen called it BANZ, BANZ.
Yeah. So now I've been involved for a while.
Yeah, so exactly, you're one of the more experienced and members. And I do remember having a phone call with you a few years ago when I was leading the association, getting some advice from you, drawing on your experience. So thank you very much for your help at that time as well.
That's fine.
Yeah. So I guess the most obvious question is, how did you get involved with blockchain or cryptocurrency, or your rabbit hole story, really?
Okay, yeah, because I guess we've all got rabbit hole stories. Well, mine started in May 2016. I can remember that. I knew about Bitcoin, but I thought it was just weird internet money and didn't think much of it. And then I listened to lots of podcasts and read books and listen to books. Anyway, I had two podcasts that I subscribed to, and I had them back to back, and they were both on blockchain, Ethereum, and smart contracts. And one was by Mark Pascal, who was basically set up bands, and one was a Canadian one. And I just blew my mind, and I thought this will change everything. And at the time, I was writing a grant proposal for digital money or something, and I thought, no, we've got to do cryptocurrency. So that's what we started off. So that's my rabbit hole. And I've changed all my research into blockchain and cryptocurrencies and things since then.
Got it. So what area of research were you in, or what was your role at the university before pivoting to blockchain?
Intellectual property, mainly copyright, also consumer law. But I've always been interested in technology, and I've taught, IT law, back in like 2001. So I've always, and what I was sort of annoyed about was that even though I read lots of tech stuff and things, I just hadn't come across blockchain, or I didn't register. And I was thinking, how? Because I do all and then maybe I'd seen it, but it wasn't until these podcasts that I, realized, wow, this will change everything.
Yeah. And then since pivoting into blockchain, I understand you're researching in several different areas, and one of them is DAOs. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my main research has been on DAOs. I've just done a whole lot of work. I'm now looking at NFTs because they raise a lot of interesting copyright issues. So I try to get away from all the previous stuff, but it's sort of dogging me. But DAOs are fascinating. And I mean, I've got a good quote that I use. I've used in writing and talks. Is that not me? Someone else wrote this said this in 2009. That we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And that sums up.
Could you repeat that again?
Sorry. Okay. So we have medieval emotions. Oh, sorry. Paleolithic emotions.
Yep.
Medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And this was
Brilliant.
2009, before, you know, our phones.
That's very clever.
And so what you've got with DAOs is you've got this amazing technology, but we've still got these old brains. And so people thought, oh, we've got this technology, we can do what we want, we can transform organizations, but no, people get in the way. And that's the whole thing with blockchain, because I've done, like you've done, a number of talks on blockchain, and it's not the technology. The technology's the easy bit. It's actually convincing people to change, and they don't want to change. So it's a bit like the DAOs, because originally people thought, well, with a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization, that it can be completely decentralized. Anyone can put forward a proposal, everyone votes on it, and then we go and do it. And it just hasn't worked that way, because as soon as you do that, you've got problems with people skewing it. If anyone can put forward a proposal, they can put someone forward to transfer all the funds to them, and no one realizes it's going through. And so there's been a huge evolution in DAOs since they've been around. First one was in BitShares in about 2014. So yeah, I could talk forever on that. But
excellent. I mean, so one of my main questions around DAOs really is, you mentioned voting and, you know, for proposals, etc. Is that the main use case, or are there other actual use cases you can use with, you know, creating a DAO?
Well, yeah, the first DAO, well, a lot of people have heard about the DAO. And so that was like a VC fund, but that wasn't the first DAO. It was a really badly named one. And in fact, it sort of hampered development of DAOs because people got worried about them. So that DAO was like a VC fund. People bought tokens, and those funds were then going to be used to fund other projects, and then the profits would come back and be distributed. And that's like what I call like a VC fund. And that's just one particular type of DAO. You can have a DAO, for example, like a charity. So Moloch DAO, another one. So people put in money, and then it gets distributed to like Ethereum developers. But you could do that for any type of charity. You can have a DAO to manage a commons. So you've got some land or something you want for that. You could have there's actually a DAO to run an insurance company, Nexus Mutual. So you can do whatever you want. I mean, within organizations, because also I teach and have written on different types of organizations, and it's the same with DAOs. You can do whatever you want. It's the, you know, this, you can even run a democracy. So Ralph Merkle, who is the inventor of Merkle trees and also public key infrastructure back in the 70s, he's proposed running a whole, you know, nation state through a DAO, which we could do. So, but we're very, very early days in this. So people are sort of working out. But the great thing about DAOs is that they allow us to experiment. And what's really interesting is because we can experiment with them now, people are using the lessons from that experiment into ordinary organizations. So it's a great time to be interested in this area.
Mm. When you talk about the DAO, are you referring to the one that lost millions of dollars way back with a hack where money was siphoned from the parent DAO to, I think, a child DAO, some sort of the coding leak?
Yeah. So the DAO was in 2016. It had all this hype, and it raised, at one stage, it was $150 million was sitting there. So you're right, someone managed to hack it. But there was, what was good about that was that they had sort of not anticipated it, but there was a thing where the money was sitting there, they could see it, tokens, but there was nothing could happen for 28 days. And this is one of the where DAOs depart from normal organizations. So a normal organization, a thief could come in and take the money and run away. But with here, they said, no one can transfer it further out. And so there was a real split in the blockchain community, because some people said, well, code is law. You did the code that way, so the person should be able to take it. And the other lot said, no, this was not the intention. And so in that case, the Ethereum blockchain, because the DAO was built on Ethereum, actually forked. So a new blockchain effectively was created, restoring it back to what it was. So that's a normal Ethereum. Then you had Ethereum Classic, and it satisfied both sides. So the people that wanted law as code could go down their path where the money had been transferred out, and then you've got the original one. And I personally think that that actually helped blockchain, because there is this thing that blockchain is immutable, but it showed that it isn't, and it helped the whole development. But also people have learned from that, and so some DAOs, for example, don't have a whole lot of money sitting there. Someone else may have it and trickle it in. So it does depend. And what I found in my research is, if you have a whole lot of money sitting there, like the DAO, people will try to attack it, but also they won't want to change and evolve. And that was another key thing with the DAO, because there was no ability to change the rules. They hadn't thought that far ahead. And you need to change the rules, because there's always things that come up and things have to evolve. So that's one of the key features of a DAO, is that the rules do change. And the question is, how do you change the rules? Who changes the rules? And there's a whole huge spectrum of that.
Yeah, I think you raise a few really important points there. Now, first of all, around changing rules. With smart contracts, initially people thought that you couldn't change smart contracts, and once it's on the blockchain, it's there forever, which is true for one version, but you always do need to upgrade software, so to speak. And talking about the DAO, did you manage to catch up with, I think, is it Christoph Gentz, the actual creator? Because he actually came to Auckland. Mark, who created the conference, invited him to speak in Auckland.
Okay, wait, was that in 2017?
Yes, that big conference.
Right. No, I was at that conference. It was a great conference, but no, I didn't. I wasn't at the time. I wasn't that interested. I mean, I knew about the DAO, but I wasn't that interested. I mean, if he came now, I would. But you needed something. It was just part of the development of the DAO. But what I found is a lot of the literature, because I'm an academic, is on the DAO, and it's almost held up as the case. This is what it is, and it's like, that's just one little bit. You've got all these other ones, so there's a lot of misinformation around.
Yeah, I can imagine that. When people study the subject or attend a lecture, the DAO would be like the most popular case study that everyone refers to.
Yeah, but it's like, I guess that's normal. Unless you've actually done a whole lot of work in this area, you won't realize all the other ones. And also another thing which is interesting, being an academic, is we're meant to cite the literature, which is peer-reviewed articles. And this stuff is happening so fast that it's not in peer-reviewed ones. I mean, it's so I some people get a bit almost worried, like, what are you citing Medium articles for? But actually, the other thing, and what's fascinating with my research, is the creators of these, the people working on them, are actually writing as they go, and you can see how they change. And actually, if anyone's interested in DAOs, there's a brilliant, very good blog post by Kane Warwick with synthetics. That's a DAO, quite a complex DAO, and 28th of June this year, and that's worth reading, because what it is that this thing of anyone being able to make a proposal and things, it doesn't really work that well. And so a number of DAOs are resorting to councils, so that you've got two starting to make decisions, but there's a whole lot of different ways you can do it. And some people say, well, look, see, we can't be decentralized, but you can do it in a more decentralized way. But his thing, and it's called An Old Dictator Appears, is that you almost need someone to coordinate these things. And I don't know how much people know, but if people are interested, a very good DAO to look at is Dash. So Dash is the oldest operating DAO, and they've done a few things which some people might think, well, how can they be properly decentralized? But they are working. So I think we need these sort of steps towards having a fully decentralized, fully functioning DAO, and Dash has, I think, achieved an okay balance.
I'm just making some notes. I'll get the link to the Medium article, and
I can send
Dash,
that to you.
That'd be great. Yeah. So just going back to the question of DAOs, you mentioned that there are lots of examples. Is the basic theory around a DAO where you submit a proposal and there's funds involved? Are they the core concepts, or can you use it for totally something very different?
Well, it just depends. I mean, you can use it for, as I said, managing a common. So it might be some land and there's no money involved, but you want to make decisions about how much you harvest of the wood each year and who has rights and things. So there is no money involved at all. But one of the ones, Polkadot, is very interesting to look at. They use a council, and what they do is anyone, yes, you can submit a proposal, but they charge it. So as soon as you start charging, it's make people think a bit more clearly. And we know the problem with not charging people for proposals. So spam emails, you know? So that stops it. But also what they've got in Polkadot is you can make a proposal if you want, but it will only go to the token holders to vote. It will go one, from the public or the token holders, and one from the council. So at each time, you've got sort of two to vote on. And people effectively, what they call second or back the proposal that you might have made. So the more people that back it, the more popular it will be, and it will rise and go through. So you've got a sort of wisdom of the crowds types of thing. And we've seen it because I think a lot of people on this call would know, this podcast. Have you ever used Slido?
No.
Slido is like a thing, have a look at it later. It's a thing for conference, say for talks and things. Because when someone gives a talk,
yes.
At the end, yeah. And then so people can put their questions and then people upvote it. And so you quickly see, and this is another equivalent of this in Polkadot. So you get the good ones coming through. Because the whole thing with the DAO is when you have it fully decentralized, there's no vetting of proposals, there's no strategic planning, which we sort of do need. So that's what a council can sort of do.
Okay. So if I can rephrase my understanding of a DAO, then is it really a mechanism or a vehicle to make decisions? Is that?
Yes, it's a coordination. Yes, coordination vehicle. Yes, and so it's people getting together. There is sort of a bit of disagreement in the literature, because some people say, well, a DAO is a completely decentralized one that makes its own decisions, like using AI, but that's an AI DAO, okay? And so, the technology is not really there yet, but you can do that. But we're talking about people. And actually an AI DAO would be a hell of a lot easier than people, because again, those paleolithic emotions, people, and also the other thing, if people are experimenting, is don't have much money involved, because when you have a lot of money involved, A, people try to hack it. Well, it's difficult to hack if you've got a good system, but B, people don't want to make changes, because if they're benefiting under the current one and you want to make changes in the voting and stuff, and they'll lose rights, they won't do anything. And that's another thing with DAOs is most DAOs are a bit like an app. So they sit on top of a blockchain. So the DAO sat on top of Ethereum. And one of the problems with that is that if you're effectively your DAO, the app is sitting on top, and there's changes underneath, then that affects it. And one of the big problems at the moment with most DAOs are running on Ethereum, and we all know the gas prices. So I was talking to someone a few years ago, and he was saying that people were complaining that it was costing 25 cents to make a vote, because that was the transaction fee. I don't know what the transaction fee at the moment is, but it has been $100 at some stages. So some of them have actually are trying to create their own blockchain, like Aragon. So Aragon is one we're creating like an ecosystem for DAOs. So you run it on top of Aragon, and they are trying to create their own blockchain so they don't have to rely on Ethereum. But most DAOs will not be operating their own blockchain, okay? Because it'll be a bit like you've got a business and you decide, well, we can write all our own software and just replicate Microsoft Word in our own thing. Well, that's almost impossible to do. So, there's so many different DAOs, it's quite scary.
Yeah, what a fascinating insight. Yeah, you're right. Very similar to tokens, where you're not going to build a blockchain just to have your own token. You're just going to use an ERC20 standard on Ethereum, for example, or any other blockchain. Yeah, thank you so much for noting that the DAO was actually the precursor to causing the fork and the birth of Ethereum Classic as well. So just in case people don't know, that's where it came from. And it feels like biological evolution, right? I mean, natural selection, you don't like it, and then you get these two branches, living organisms.
Well, yes, and in fact, the forking is really important in DAOs, because if you don't like the way it's operating, you can go off and copy it all and make your own DAO. But there's pros and cons with that, because as we've seen with Ethereum Classic, is that what's happened? Not much has happened, because they haven't got the developers and people behind you. So yeah, you can go off by yourself, but you may not get very far. So it's about convincing people that you've got the better model. And also what it means is that in theory, it should keep people sort of more honest, because they don't want a whole lot of people breaking off. So it's like it's a constitutional governance mechanism, the threat of being able to walk away. And we don't have that with normal organizations. So say, for example, say Facebook. If an employee decides, right, I don't like Facebook, I'm going to go and create new Facebook, looks exactly the same, does all this stuff. Under the current, you can't do that. Okay, but with a DAO, yes, you could go and take all the source code and replicate it.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that's also, I mean, not to draw on the price, but if you look at the price of Ethereum Classic versus Ethereum, there's a remarkable difference there, indicating, the momentum that they have. Ethereum Classic being something like $10 versus $2,000.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah, exactly. So it's all about the community and people working together.
Yeah. So in your area of research, you mentioned earlier about peer reviews and working with other people potentially. How many people around the world do you know are working on DAOs, and do you collaborate with them?
The closest collab, a little bit with the people at RMIT. So they're brilliant, like Jason Potts and Aaron, I forgot his name, I'm terrible with names. So yeah, that's about the closest I'm doing at the moment. But with NFTs and other stuff in blockchain, I'm working with someone in my faculty who's in accounting and finance. And it is really important with all of this is to have those interdisciplinary working, because we all bring different things. And that's what I love about blockchain, is because it's got people from everywhere. So yeah, you've got your programmers, but you need people from everywhere, and especially UX. So that's been one of the biggest problems with blockchain. Hasn't been that easy to use. So it's making it simple. And that's one, actually, a bit of a tangent. That's why something like, what's it called? It's not Libra, it's now Diem, which is the Facebook one.
Oh, have they renamed
so
it?
Libra. Yeah. So have a look at that. Libra is now Diem, DIEM, and that's already got millions of users, or 1 billion users, plus a wonderful interface, so they can just fly. Whereas you could have much better technology, but if it's not easy to use, people won't use it. And this is one of the things, because I've been interested in technology and all this for many years, is it's not how good your technology is. You can have crap technology, but everyone will use it. It's a bit like, for people that are a bit older, difference between VHS and Betamax. So Betamax was better, but what won? It was VHS. So there's a whole lot of other things that go around it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, people were lazy. We want to do things the easiest, quickest way. And for the younger generations, those were video recorders, the VCR.
Sorry.
Yeah. A question around decision-making in DAOs, because as mentioned, it helps people or organizational groups make decisions. But if we compare to the real world, so for example, I understand that in DAOs, everyone has an equal right, or their decision has equal weight. Is that true?
It depends. So a lot of them are doing like one token, one vote, but you don't have to have that. You can have one member, one vote. But the trouble is, in blockchain, is people can have a Sybil attack. So what that means is they can, set up different accounts and be different people. So that undermines it. But what people are doing is using new voting methods. And one of them, which I'll explain or tell you about, and then I can send you a link to put up, is conviction voting. Because part of the problem with that one token, one vote is what we call plutarchy. So you've got someone that's very wealthy and rich, a lot of tokens, they can blow everyone out of the water. So what conviction voting does is, and also for expressing preferences. So say you've got proposal A, B, C, D, and E, and you want to vote, you might like B a lot and the other one's not so much. But at the moment, if you just it's very difficult under the current system. So what you can do there is you can put, say, 60% on B, and then the other ones on the other thing. But also it's time. So the longer your vote is there, the more weight it gets. And so you've got someone that might come at the last moment, but they don't, a whole lot of people with lower token holdings who've held it for a long time can actually end up trumping them. But anyway, I'll send it through to you. Quadratic voting is another thing, but that's not for changing proposals so much, that's more for funding. But it's just all this experimentation that we can do now. There's also things like, because the other problem with voting and this Paleolithic emotions is a lot of people don't have the technical expertise, or they don't have the time. So does everyone vote in an election? No. Okay, so can you imagine where you need one vote a week or 10 votes a day? It's never going to happen. And so people use a thing, delegated voting, where you might give someone your vote and things like that. So there's all these different things that people are using.
Yeah, this is really fascinating stuff, and it feels like you're at the forefront of this developing technology and the concepts and ideas as well.
Yeah. No, there's other people as well, but it is fascinating.
You mentioned earlier about NFTs as well. So, NFTs and DAOs are very different, but are you merging them together, or are you treating them as separate areas of study?
No, at the moment, separate. So again, there's a lot of misinformation about DAOs. There's also a lot of misinformation about NFTs, and there's actually basically almost no academic literature on NFTs, which we're doing because we're writing on. Part of it's for valuation of NFTs and things. But also people think, it's about art. But of course, an NFT doesn't have to be about an artwork. It could be your identity. It could be a concert ticket. It could be the right to use a platform for a certain amount of time. So it could be the ownership of a physical item. You could have fractionalized NFTs. So you could have 100 like tokens in an apartment, and 100 different people can own it. So it's the world is your oyster. I mean, there can be crossovers. So Flamingo DAO is a thing where people, it's like an art club. So they buy NFTs, and then you're a member of the DAO. So you own, a share in the NFTs. But what's interesting, so read some of Flamingo DAO stuff, and people don't know history. So one of the things I read said that this, for the first time in the world, you can have, part share in an artwork. Well, art clubs are not new, okay? But they were hard because you had to be sort of like a smaller one, and know people, and people, they still have them. So you can buy it and you get the right to hang their artwork for a week in your house, and you share it around. So what they're doing is just taking concepts that are already here and just using them, in a different way. But there's a lot, it's always quite funny when people come to me, they've got this wonderful idea. And I say, either these 3 projects are doing that idea, or actually this isn't a new concept, but there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, in New Zealand especially, we've got this thing about wanting to be first in something. And if someone else has done it, then it's not worth doing it because it's not new and original. And no, you don't want to be the first that does anything. So Facebook was not the first social media thing. Google was not the first. You look at what people are doing, and then you work out their problems, and then you have a better one. And that's what people need to look at. There's also, I'll send you a link, a thing called withered technology with Nintendo. So everyone knows Nintendo. Nintendo did exceptionally well because it wasn't doing the cutting edge. It was doing tried technology that works and selling that. I don't know, there's this thing having to be first. No.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, Facebook was not the first social media site.
I think you've touched on a couple of really important points there, in particular around being first and improving, really touches on upon the subject of innovation and how do you innovate. And you don't have to be the first. And those points are so valid. I just want to take a step back because I realize that maybe we're speaking a lot of acronyms because we're in the industry, but people might not know what an NFT is. So if you could define, or maybe just explain briefly what is an NFT?
I should have done that. Okay, an NFT is a non-fungible token. So normally, say for example, if I lend you $10 and then you pay me back later, it's not the same $10 note. I don't care. I just want the money back. Bitcoin, sort of. So if I had half a Bitcoin and I lent it to you, and you pay me back later, I'm not expecting the same half one. Mind you, no, it's a little bit more complicated than that. But effectively, half a Bitcoin is the same, whatever it is. Whereas a non-fungible token that's a unique thing. So, for example, your identity, there's not two people with the same thing, or if so it's different. So say it's an artwork and it represents a certain artwork, I expect to get the same. I lent it to you for 3 days. I expect to get the same one back. So that's sort of they haven't explained it that well, but they are different. One of the first uses for NFTs was a thing called CryptoKitties. I'll send you something good on that. And that was a thing with an early digital art. So you got a certain cat, a digital cat, and they were all completely unique. And I think you mentioned before about the tokens with Ethereum. So the first NFT was actually on Ethereum. So it's just a different type of token. But while they are unique, you can actually have them so you can split them into bits, like I said before, fractionalized. So if you've got an apartment, for example, you could have 100 bits of it. And the advantage of that is, say you do have your 100 NFTs, and you've got different people owning, say, 1 each or 10, and there's rents coming in. If it was in a cryptocurrency, you'd have a smart contract there that would just pay everybody out according to their share. So, NFTs have the potential to change almost every industry. Another quick example of it is like a concert ticket. So I think we've all had the experience of buying a concert ticket and then not being able to go. And people are reluctant to buy it from you because you could just send 10 people the same PDF file. Whereas if that concert ticket is NFT, there's only one of them. It cannot be duplicated at all. And that's one of the things that people have been working on because it's like low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I think that probably the main key word is that it's unique, right? The one and only, yes, as you mentioned. Yeah. Interesting note you talked about Bitcoin being kind of, because I know exactly what you mean, because there's the concept of a Bitcoin that's tainted, so to speak. So they can be different. You might not want to accept a Bitcoin that's been through been received from like a gambling website, so to speak. But that's probably a bit
above. But this actually, but there's an important point that some people won't realize, because you get these. Some people say, "Oh, well, Bitcoin is anonymous," but it's not. It's pseudonymous, and also with the and you can trace as well. And so that's why, if I was a criminal, which I'm not, I would not be wanting payment in Bitcoin because it can be traced to me. There are some coins, for example, Monero and Zcash, which are genuinely anonymous, or they're called privacy coins. But you're right, the thing about the mixer is that you can sort of tumble them and get them, but you can still, you may not be able to trace where they came from, but you can see they've been through this process. So they really only go through the process because a criminal may want to use them. But also just on that is there's a lot of bad, again, misleading information. The prevalence of criminals using cryptocurrencies is much lower, all the evidence says, than using bank accounts or cash. So sure, some people use cryptocurrencies for criminal activities, but a lot less than the normal banking system.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I mean, it's super fascinating stuff. You talk about fractionalized NFTs, so that rings a bell, because only recently I saw the acronym FNFT. I was like, what is FNFT? And of course, it's fractionalized, which is fascinating. So with your areas of research, I mean, how long have you been doing this, and how long are you going to publish a paper on this or write a thesis? I mean, where are you on your journey?
Well, I started May 2016. That's when I sort of changed. So I've been written some stuff, but talking about a thesis and stuff, and why with DAOs is end of May, so just over a month ago, I actually handed in a thesis on DAOs. So I'm just waiting for the examiners to get back, which, even though I've been an academic for over 20 years, when I started, most law academics didn't have PhDs. In fact, I've supervised someone with a PhD, so it's a bit of a overdue PhD. I will be publishing stuff probably out of it, but the thing is, it's traveling so fast, so it's not like your normal one. And actually, that was one of the things, had discussions with my supervisors early on, is whether to look back in time. But I was saying no. I mean, I was still doing changes to it, 3 days before I handed it in, because new developments that were directly, impacting on it. Looked at. I mean, just one of the things, what I looked at is part of it was the governance, but also dispute resolution. So you get some people who say, well, smart contracts, what's written there, there'll never be any disputes. But no, there will be disputes. And what some people are doing is actually have set up dispute resolution mechanisms for smart contracts and blockchain. And one of the questions I looked at is, can you exclude the operation of the court? Because for most non-lawyers, they won't realize, but the courts like to have final say. And so you can say, no court can, you can't appeal from this decision. And a lot of courts say, no, we can come along. So that's one of the questions. But also, this very quickly, is the in the UK, for some people who are interested, the same body that wrote some guidelines for cryptocurrencies and legal recognition for them have released a couple of months ago on dispute resolution, because what they've worked out is it doesn't really work, the current thing. They've got a whole lot of setting up a arbitration system, quite complicated, but they've also recognized the platforms for peer resolution. So Kleros, for example, has been involved in that. So if anyone's interested, the two big ones are Kleros and Aragon Court. And even though they say court, they're not the same. And when I've been explaining to lawyers and things, they can't get their heads around it. It's completely different. And so there you've got, people, jurors who put it forward. You've got a whole lot of game theory, because they stake tokens, they get paid depending on how they vote. So all this whole other world of dispute resolution, which it also ties into my interests. I've written on this, and also I've been involved in dispute resolution schemes as well.
With your work, do you publish papers, or can other people get access to what you've written? Is that how it works in the academic world, or?
Yes and no. Even though most of my work was on copyright and trying to cut copyright down, some of the stuff I've published is only accessible through very expensive subscriber things. But if if people just Google Alex Sims blockchain, different stuff will come up. I do have a thing on regulation of cryptocurrencies, which is available online, SSRN, and I've done one on an early one on DAOs, but that's a few, that was early in my research, which is also available. It's not the final version, but it's almost a final version. To be honest, I've been concentrating on my thesis and not doing as much, but that will come out. But it's just, if people are interested, it is fascinating, and there is a lot more going on. And I mean, what I would probably do is, once my thesis has been examined, is just to put the PhD up online so that other people can have the benefit of looking at it.
That would be totally amazing, because I mean, I know I'd certainly be interested in reading, because when someone studies a field for so long, for many years, in a deeply, the level of understanding is very different to just reading, Medium articles and media write-ups, so to speak.
Yes, but one of the trouble though is writing an academic thesis is different from. You've got all these conventions you've got to do, and you end up, I've cut out more than what's in there. So, and so part of what I do is, I need to do more of it, but actually writing stuff that people can understand, or giving talks and things like that. And normally hasn't been the best, but normally I do explain myself a bit better with like acronyms and things. But you need to, it's part of our thing of, I don't just publish in, peer-reviewed things and things like that, is to get the information out there. And I need to do that on DAOs especially. But it is complicated. It's I did but also it's almost harder trying to write for a legal audience, because they've got all these preconceptions, whereas the average person doesn't. Actually, another, I could go on forever.
Oh, totally fascinating. And you're absolutely right. Communicating to the audience, different audiences with different knowledge levels, is actually an amazing skill to have and to learn as well. So I know that you could go on forever, and so could I. It's totally fascinating, but I just wanted to turn our attention to the Blockchain Executive Council. What do you do in the Executive Council?
Okay, so I'm on the Executive Council as a basically representative of educational institutions. So there's different universities and things that are members. And so my role is, I guess some of it's answering, we get some queries and things, and maybe going out and giving a talk if people are interested. One of my passion projects is education. But again, to be honest, I've been a bit more sort of obsessed with my one, but the plan is to do more resources. But the thing with it is there is so much online, but it's what people find difficult is they don't know what is good to look at, what is accurate. So part of what we really need to do is actually just even have the links to this and this and this. The other problem we have, and this is what I've experienced for decades now, is our law can be different from overseas. And so you see that in everything. So people think that the US law is the same as New Zealand law or Australian law. It's different. So some of it is actually explaining that it's not. So yeah, that's sort of what I'm trying to do, but maybe haven't been doing quite as much.
Yeah, and just a final point on your note about history, it does repeat. Nothing really is new, and it is fascinating hearing people think that they've got the best idea ever that's going to make $1 million when it's probably been done before.
Yes, but I do think though that DAOs, we can genuinely do new things. Very quickly, one of the things that we've had in the past is the division between capital and labor. So this can collapse it. So you could have like an Uber-like DAO where the drivers are getting paid in the tokens of the DAO, which they can redeem, swap for fiat currency, but they also make the decision. So that's fundamentally different from what's gone before. Some people might say, oh, cooperatives, we've had cooperatives, but really cooperatives are not much different because you still have the governing body. So this, but I just think it's going to be a long time to get there, to work out how, and all these different voting mechanisms, like I mentioned, conviction voting and other things, and with the council. So like with the council, normally people get elected for a certain period of time. With these councils, anyone can remove someone if they don't like how they're voting and things like that. So it's more dynamic. You know, they're not just replicating exactly the same thing. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
We will indeed. Once again, thank you so much for your time, Alex. It's been very fascinating. And yeah, look forward to hearing more about your work online and other places.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
No, thanks, Alex. I'll catch you later.